Welcome to your reading. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little note that this reading is for the purposes of growth and healing, and it covers the parts of your life that are most relevant to your personal development, and then how those parts of you will change and evolve over the course of your life. And because we're looking at a lifelong process of growth, you might find that certain parts of your being are still being expressed unconsciously, while others have already found their conscious expression. Put another way, some parts of you still need maturing and healing, just as we all do, while others may have already been fully developed or healed. So in essence, that's what we're looking at in your reading today. What energies you're holding and how those energies are naturally expressed, which would be the conscious expression, and then how they can become distorted, through different life experiences, like through trauma, abuse, anything that would distort the natural healthy expression of that energy. So as we go through these different parts of your being, we're going to be looking at the essence of the energy, and then you can determine for yourself, how that's being expressed in your own life. So the first thing we're going to look at is the different meanings of the planets in your birth chart. The first planet we'll be looking at is the moon, which represents your emotions or your inborn emotional needs and conditioned responses. Our moon is the part of us that is so automatic that we are not consciously aware of it. When reflecting on your reading, it can be helpful to look at the unhealthy and healthy expressions of your emotions and see which ones you most identify with. If we've done little to no healing or personal growth work, we may not be able to identify with the unhealthy expression of our emotions. And the reason that is because if there's something in your chart or in your reading that you're not able to identify with, that means that it's still highly unconscious, so unconscious that, you can't see it. You can't resonate with it. It's still deeply hidden. But if you're mostly unhappy or unfulfilled in your life or in your emotions, that is a sure sign that you're operating out of an emotionally unhealthy space. So let's just say that I go over, the natural expression of your emotions, and you can identify with that, but you can tell that there's problems in your emotional life. You're constantly unhappy, having like emotional outbursts or upsets, and that's a clue to you that there's something wrong there, even though you might not be able to consciously identify with it. There's still something wrong. So that's it's a clue that there's something to work on there. We might not be able to consciously identify with our patterns or our automatic unconscious ways of responding to people and events in our life, but experiencing upsets and painful emotions on a regular basis, or alternatively, feeling little to no emotion on a regular basis, is a sign that we have some emotional healing and growing to do. If we are aware of our emotions and are using them as feedback to navigate our lives, and if our emotions are generally more pleasant than not, this is a sure sign that we are expressing our emotions in a healthy way. And if you'd like to apply the info in your reading in order to create change in your life, you can begin by paying attention to your automatic emotional responses and seeing what emotional strategies for meeting your needs that you're currently utilizing. When you emotionally respond to a person or event, is the response harmful or helpful, acquired or learned? Remember, our emotional responses are highly unconscious. They are ways of reacting emotionally that most of us are completely unaware of. To become conscious of our conditioned responses takes awareness. Awareness that comes through watching ourselves to see how we're actually responding to triggering events, people, or other things in our life. Having said all that, this is your emotions. Over the course of your life, the way that you emotionally relate to yourself and the world will change. As you age, taking the time to get in touch with your values and goals will become more important to your personal sense of happiness and fulfillment, as will having a career or public role that is in harmony with your personal interests, values, etc. You will learn who you are and what you want by spending time in solitude in order that you might find your personal definition of success. This change in how you relate to yourself will happen via any transformational life experiences that you have. So for you, your emotional need is the need for mastery or integrity in your career or public role. And the best strategy for meeting this need is isolation or solitude for the purpose of learning self-approval. So when we spend time by ourselves, I guess honing a craft or engaged in, hobbies that we're really interested in or that align with our personal values, we're doing things because we like it, because we enjoy it, and maybe it's not somebody else's definition of what it looks like to be successful, but by blocking out the world and all its messages around what success looks like and should be, that's how we learn how to find our true work, and then spend time honing that craft and mastering that skill, so that when we do come out of isolation, we can present we can, I guess, what we do in the world will match who we are inside. And that's the next piece of integrity. So integrity means only acting from your notion of success versus the world or other people's. You'll emotionally grow and evolve through self-mastery, through approval of yourself that is independent of others' approval. The self-respect is built in solitude and through self-discipline. By doing things alone that you truly enjoy, you learn that there is no standard version of success, and taking time to get to know your values, goals, etc. You are able to marry your true interests with your public career or role, and in so doing, you're able to integrate your true self into society successfully. So what I just wrote here, this is talking about how your emotions will change and grow over the course of your life. So for you, your emotions are highly attached to your work and your career. So you need, in order to be happy emotionally and to be healthy emotionally, you have to work at, being in solitude, working towards honing a skill that, that you really enjoy, and then presenting that to the world in your work. So the unconscious expression of this would be an externalized expression. So controlling your emotions, the world, or other people or things equates to trying to control and repress the world or life itself. So when we're somebody who is looking outside of ourselves, when we're externalizing our emotions, we're looking at other people and their ideas about success to tell us what should make us happy, is basically what this is saying. And in order to do that, in order to I guess, delegate one's, one's career, one's work in the world to the thoughts and opinions and feelings of other people means that we have to shut down our emotions, because now we're doing something for the sake of what other people think success is or looks like versus what we really want to be doing. Excuse me, I'm a little congested this morning. So we have to shut down our emotions, and then when we do that to ourselves, we treat the world and other people and things the same way. Because we've tried to control our own self, now we have to control everyone else and the world, and that results in loneliness. So if you're somebody who's experienced loneliness or is currently experiencing loneliness, that would mean that you're experiencing that or have experienced it because, you haven't been authentic. You had to shut down your own emotions and what you really wanted for the sake of other people and their approval. And, when you do that, it creates loneliness, because when you do that, you're not really known and seen for who you truly are. It's all a mask and a facade, and you could have people around you, but you always feel lonely because you're not showing who you truly are. On the alternative, the conscious expression of the same dynamic would be, now you're going inside, you're internalizing your emotional need for mastery or integrity in your career or public role. And this is done through controlling your actions, through self-discipline. So now, instead of trying to control and repress your emotions, which is the unconscious expression, you've learned that I can't really control anything. To control my emotions, to try to control my emotions is folly. To try to control others or the world or anything is folly. All I can control are my own actions. That's all I really have control and power over. And when that happens, now you're developing self-discipline versus discipline of others or of the emotions. And this leads to, now instead of loneliness, it leads to isolation. So again, you're spending time alone to master a skill or a craft that you're going to turn into a career that is in true resonance with you, that you really find enjoyable. And that, that takes time and patience and self-discipline, practicality, and through that process you develop an iron will. So as far as your emotional growth goes, you'll want to be looking at, where am I now? Am I in the unconscious expression of that, or am I in the conscious expression? And again, for you, your emotional need is for mastery or integrity in your career. And the best strategy, again, is, spending that time alone, honing a skill or craft that you really enjoy. Okay, let's see. So that is the energy, and then the area of life for you for emotional growth. Your emotional growth will take place via experiences that lie outside of your ability, the ability of your conscious mind to comprehend. So experiences like death, sex, and the paranormal. Those most transformative and baffling, beautiful, and horrific experiences that life has to offer. So a question for your emotional growth can be, how can I accept the reality of feelings arising beyond my personality? Successful navigation of this would look like healthy, flowing, spontaneous sexuality, acceptance of death, and an integration of its reality into daily life, and a sense of the immortality of your consciousness. An unsuccessful navigation would look like blocked sexual functioning or obsessive sexuality, inordinate fear of death, denial of death, rigid denials of religious, occult, or mystical feelings. So for you, your happiness tied to your career is going to be tied up in these areas that we're talking about here. So the areas of life that are outside of one's control, which I think is a nice tie-in to the theme of your emotions and how they'll grow and develop, because we talked a little bit about that control and how, trying to control things that we don't have any control over. Like we don't have any control over, our sexuality. We don't have any control over death or anything that's paranormal. Those are all areas of life that are outside of our control. So I think that any experiences that you've had like that are trying to serve you to break that pattern of control. Controlling your emotions specifically is what we're talking about here. That's the key. And then as far as your emotions themselves, so if you want to have another little clue about where you're at with your emotional growth, the emotional dysfunction would look like things such as emotional self-indulgence, timidity and laziness, wishy-washiness, overactive imagination, or indecision and moodiness. Okay, that's for your emotional growth. Let's move on to your identity growth. Okay, so we each have a self-identity, which is our authentic self and how we express it. And in astrology, the symbol for that is the sun. And just as the life-giving sun is the center of the solar system, everything orbits around it. The gravity produced by its enormous mass holds the planets in their trucks. Astrologically, the sun works the same way in the birth chart. It is the gravitational center of the human personality. It is the focal point of all the varied functions that coexist within each of us. The sun in our chart is our image, or ego. Without a self-concept, there is no one who feels the moon, and no one who has a personality, the ascendant or rising, which we'll talk about next. We cannot reason Mercury, will Mars, or love Venus without a self, the sun, to do those things. Having a healthy self-identity leads to a pleasant life, while having an unhealthy view of self or ego lends to needless pain and suffering. In your reading, the needs of your sun are revealed and possible strategies for meeting those needs are discussed. The strategy you're using to meet the needs of your self-identity should be more readily identifiable versus the moon, because we're talking, the sun or self-identity is a lot more conscious. The moon is usually pretty highly unconscious, again, unless we've done some personal development, healing, or growth work. It tends to remain highly unconscious. Okay, let's move on. So for your identity, this is based on your chart. Over the course of your life, you will grow and evolve to identify as someone who perceives manifest reality as it actually exists. via habits such as openness, receptivity, and communication. This growth in your self-concept will happen via your personality or persona. Okay, and I like the tie-in here so far between your emotions and your identity, because it's saying here that, over the course of your life, you're going to grow to become someone who perceives manifest reality as it actually exists via openness, which is the opposite of control and repression, right? Which we saw as a potential for the moon. So your identity need is the need to perceive manifest reality as it actually exists. So what that means is that we are unbiased in our perceptions of whatever, sensory stimuli we're receiving. The strategy for meeting this need, sorry, that cat's meowing in the background. Learning through openness, receptivity, and communication. Your identity grows and evolves by remaining open and receptive to life's varied experiences. This is a nice tie-in here with your moon. And for your emotions, those experiences are going to include any types of experiences that you have no control over. So, anything tied to the paranormal, death, or sexuality. And then also different people's ideas, knowledge you can't gain from your own limited life experience. You acquire additional knowledge you can't gain on your own through talking with and listening to others, and that's the communication piece. Your perception, the ways in which you interact or communicate with the world, is sensory in nature, so through feeling, tasting, touching, hearing. The undigested data of what you perceive and not its meaning is the purpose behind your communication, curiosity, and openness. Okay, so the unconscious expression for your identity need would be, again, it's externalized. Generally, when we're expressing energy unconsciously, we tend to externalize it versus internalize it. So that would look like intellectual debates, factorium, a know-it-all trying to figure things out, busyness, overextension, excessive chatter, emotional and nervous system exhaustion. The trying to figure things out here piece, this ties back to, where was it? Oh. So any information or perceptions that you are sensing, that you're taking in through your senses, the healthy expression of that is going to be that you're just going to be taking it and you're going to be soaking it all in and not attaching any specific meaning to it. So if you're somebody who's always trying to figure out, well, let's just say we'll do a tie-in with your emotions and your moon. Let's just say that you had this experience, this paranormal experience, and you're like constantly trying to figure out, well, what does this mean? What does it mean for my life? For you, that would be an unhealthy thing to do. And I think the reason that it would be unhealthy, again, goes back to your evolutionary goals of your sun and moon. In your emotions, you're trying to loosen control over it through any experiences, any life experiences, of things that you can't control. And then with your identity, it's changing and evolving to be someone who's very open and receptive in the perceptions that they're receiving, through their senses. So you don't want to be attaching meaning to things. The conscious expression, again, is internalized, so you're going inside with this energy. And that looks like somebody who's unbiased. They have open perceptions of the world via the senses. They might have a sense of wonder about the world, like, wow, the world is so amazing. There's so much to learn. And, just, I guess, experiencing the world through the eyes of a child, like everything is new and fresh because, you're not attaching that meaning to it. Children, when they experience something, are generally not saying, oh, well, this is what this means, and trying to put it in a box and a label. That's not the mind that they have. That's more the mind of an adult. Learning, a perpetual student, curiosity, and intelligence. Now, this growth, the area of life that this identity growth will take place in, is through the kind of person you portray yourself as, which is the persona or the personality, which we're going to talk about next. It's the simplified version of ourselves, and or the vehicle for our growth or self-identity. Successful navigation of this area of life would look like clarity and decisiveness in your actions, a sense of control over your direction in life, a sharply focused sense of identity. Unsuccessful navigation, fearfulness and lack of self-assurance, leading either to inflexibility and tyranny over the wills of others, or to self-effacement, vagueness of purpose, and the assumption of defeat. Now, when we're talking about the identity itself, dysfunction there could look like selfishness and insensitivity, tyranny over the lives of others, vanity and pomposity, inflexibility, domineering, or arrogance. Okay, let's move on to your persona or personality. It's the kind of person you portray yourself as. The ascendant is our personality. When we talk about ascendant, that's your rising sign in your birth chart. The kind of person we portray ourselves as. It is the one-dimensional character that those who aren't familiar with us see us as. The human being is a multi-layered, complex entity with many different sides. The ascendant is the side of us we show to those that we don't know well. It is our optimal persona, the outer superficial expression of ourself that best serves the combined needs of all the different parts of ourself. The ascendant does not create the personality, rather it channels the totality of the person, or the totality of the birth chart, into the world of action. It is the simplest expression of all that we really are. Not everyone we meet in life can or will know us at a deep level. We need this simplified persona in order to interact successfully with the world of strangers, acquaintances, colleagues, clients, etc. Without a strong, well-developed personality, our journey in life becomes challenging through things like social awkwardness, confusion, or drifting. The ascendant advises us about how to best organize our social personality. Okay, that was a little bit on the personality itself. Now your specific persona or personality. Over the course of your life, your persona will become someone who perceives things as they are, someone who is open, receptive, and communicative. And in your chart, your personality and your persona and your self-identity are the exact same energies. So if this is sounding repetitive, that's why. So it's the same need for your persona as your identity, which is the need to perceive, manifest reality as it actually exists. The same strategy. And then the same unconscious and conscious expression. Okay, let's move on to the chart ruler. So this is the highest expression of your personal growth. The chart ruler represents the most characteristic area of our evolutionary work in this lifetime. As such, it plays a pivotal role in establishing our sense of personal distinction and identity. It helps us define ourselves. The functions of the chart ruler are intimately bound up in the formation of our self-image or sun. A strong response to the chart ruler suggests positive feelings about yourself and a successful adaptation to everyday life. A weak response implies the opposite: role conflict, awkwardness, feelings of illegitimacy, and very typically social withdrawal. Okay, so for your personal leading edge of growth, your perceptions or reasoning is the part of you that can achieve the highest level of growth in this lifetime. This growth will either take place through experiences you have outside of normal states of consciousness, so those that disrupt your identification with your self-identity or ego, or through experiences related to your personality or persona in some way. And I put one of the two options here because your chart ruler is technically in the 12th house, but it's close enough to the first house cusp that, I always like to, like for me personally, when I've had a planet that close to a house cusp, sometimes its actual placement in my chart, depending on which house system I'm using, can feel wrong for me when I check in with my actual life experience and I say, okay, is it this or is it this? And then sometimes it's turned out to be, according to my lived experience, the place that it's not actually in my chart, but that it's close to. So you'll have to check in with yourself and see, which of these feels true for you. And then the way you take in and put out info is directly tied to your persona or people's first impression of you. Your mind likely works differently than a lot of other people's, and that it is innovative and imaginative. You are likely a free thinker, but can feel it hard to express what you perceive and imagine into words sometimes. Because your logic or communication is unique, others are likely to perceive you as either different or fascinating. So the area of life for your highest growth potential. The highest growth you can achieve will take place within your consciousness itself via events and experiences that disrupt your identification with your personality in some way. This is going to be true, again, if your chart ruler is actually in the 12th house. If it's not, then it will be related to a successful creation of a personality, that more superficial aspect of yourself. If it is in the 12th, the related areas of life are likely to include the crises that you faced, those impossible situations that will either destroy us or bring us closer to God, those experiences that can lead to ego death in some way. If your chart ruler is, you feel like it's more resonating with your first house, then it's going to talk about, the successful creation of that personality or persona and how to integrate that, into society. Okay, these are successful navigation and unsuccessful for that 12th house placement. So that would look like self-transcendence, freedom from worry about the ups and downs of life, spiritual and psychic experiences, meditation, sense of the presence of God or higher levels of consciousness. If it's unsuccessful, it could look like blurry, confused, uncertain image, escapism, abusive, self-destructive relationships with alcohol, food, sleep, sex, television, or other drugs, hypersensitivity, mental imbalance, schizophrenia, or chronic bad luck. Okay, and then now I'm going to go, so that was covering your your emotions, your self-identity, and your persona, as well as your highest growth potential. So those are the main factors of somebody's life and chart. We're going to go into more of the details. So here I'm going to be looking at aspects, you know, to your emotions, to your self-identity, to your persona, which are dominant factors of your personality. Okay, so for this aspect here, you're going to have a deep connection or link between your perceptions and your persona. So what you perceive, and if you choose to, you know, and how you choose to handle what you perceive, you know, whether you choose to handle that in a conscious or unconscious way, is going to deeply impact your persona or personality, which is how other people are going to, you know, see you, people that you don't know very well. For you, when your persona is activated, so let's just say that, you know, you're out in public and you meet somebody new for the first time, or maybe it's, you know, an acquaintance that you already kind of know. When you're in that type of situation, automatically your perceptions are going to be activated. So those two things within you are tied together. They're in it, you know, they're linked. And then again, when your perception, so when you're out in the world and you're perceiving things via your senses, it's going to have a bearing on your persona, or how others, you know, how you're choosing to portray yourself to others, and in turn how they're viewing you. For this aspect here, your will and mind are in harmony with one another. The strength of this relationship is that you can grow very easily and rapidly when you put effort into that growth. So that's the gift of this aspect. And then a potential weakness for this aspect between your will and mind can be a lack of perspective. Because both of these parts of your being, your will and your mind, are in agreement, and with no conflict occurring between them, your actions can be filled with imbalance and bad judgment. So that's just something to, you know, to look out for, or something that you might have noticed. This aspect here, there is tension between your mind and your sense of individuality, or your authentic self. This can manifest in a myriad of ways. One possibility is that you don't feel comfortable expressing your true self through your words or communication. So that expression comes out in different ways, you know, through art, fantasizing, whatever it might be. The way to resolve the tension that exists between your mind, communication, or perceptions, and your authentic self is finding a way to see both sides of a story. For example, that your truth and another's truth can simultaneously coexist. So in essence, the solution is developing the capacity for paradox. Paradox being that two seemingly opposing things can be simultaneously true. And I have a really small YouTube channel, and I have a nice video on there about navigating paradox, specifically between the spirit and the ego. And I included the link here if you think that that might be helpful for you. Okay, now the planet Venus is highlighted in your chart, and all the things that I've included in your reading are things that are highlighted in your chart. I haven't included the whole chart, only the pieces that were highlighted. Now you have Venus in its natural sign of Taurus. So that makes things like internal harmony, relationships, and aesthetics of major importance in your life. Based on your chart, that internal harmony is gained through a belief in and merging with of your perceptions, including any extrasensory ones. The building of the relationships to your own consciousness, as well as your instinct and intuition, or the divine feminine within you are the most important relationships for you to develop for the purpose of personal growth. The growth of your aesthetic response may also be important and will be informed by a growth in your perceptions as well as your relationship to your consciousness and instinct. So this is saying that for you, I guess each of us, depending on our chart, we have different types of relationships that are highlighted for us as far as growth and development. And for you, that relationship between your perceptions and your aesthetic response, your consciousness, anything that involves inherent beauty and the divine feminine is really important for you, which makes sense to me, based on what we've already talked about with your moon and your identity. Dysfunction here could look like laziness, manipulation, vanity, spinelessness, chronic abandonment to sensuality. Okay, and then dominant features of your life experience. So you're likely somebody who's had experiences outside of normal states of consciousness. That could look anything, like drug trips, out-of-body experiences, anything that's, outside of what's considered normal states of consciousness. And these experiences will take place via your perceptions in early childhood. And they're also a part of your early childhood wounding. And they most likely happen through either your relationships, most likely with your parents, or your response to natural beauty, which is what we were just talking about, through your aesthetic sensory responses. Okay, the growth of your will or self-discipline and destiny are also dominant features of your life experiences. So for you, healthy, fulfilling expression of your will and the proper development of your self-discipline and destiny hinge on you finding peace within yourself by healing your childhood wounding, which we'll examine next. You will find this inner security and calm through one or more of the following types of experiences: creative self-expression, fun or play, or romance. Your creative self-expression or play for no other reason than pure joy in relation to your perceptions is integral in the formation of a healthy identity for you. I think that this piece, ties in really nice again to what you're trying to do in your growth with your emotions and your identity. Your will, self-mastery, and the development of faith in your destiny is in conflict with your emotions and internal world. So when we talk about here will, this ties into, your moon and developing that self-discipline and isolation. And then that also ties into self-mastery, because when you take some time to go internal and get in touch with your emotions and say, well, what's really important to me and what makes me happy? And you figure out what that is and you start spending time alone working on that, something that you can turn into a career, then that's what we're talking about with destiny here. Your destiny is what you're here to do. It's what your purpose is, like what work you're here to do. And it's not somebody else's idea of what you should be doing. It's what's natural, what's inherent within you to do. So in your chart, I'm seeing that there's conflict between all that and your emotions and internal world. So going back to your emotions, trying to control or suppress your feelings related to any transformational life experiences that you've had, those things outside of your control is likely the source of this conflict. How can how can we master or develop faith in what we deny or repress, and how can we fulfill our destiny if we refuse to feel or acknowledge it? How can we develop our will to find internal security or peace through creative self-expression if we deny our feelings? Those are some questions that might be, that maybe one time were relevant to you and aren't anymore, but if they are, some good questions that you could be asking. Dysfunction of will. So because your will is such an important aspect of your being for growth in this lifetime, a clue that there's dysfunction there would be things like touchiness, rage, selfishness, insensitivity, cruelty, sadism, bombast, or irritability. And then for self-discipline, depression, melancholy, cynicism, coldness, unresponsiveness, time-serving, drudgery, lack of imagination, suppression of emotion or materialism. And then dysfunction of destiny, megalomania, grandiosity, violence, preaching, dogmatism, rigidity, dictatorial behavior, hunger for power, a sense of meaningless or absurdity, and justifies the means thinking. So again, our destiny is the full embodiment of our individuated self. So it's the self that we come to know through examining our emotions and being in touch with them and figuring out who we are and who we are not. What is truly us and what is everyone else. What is our parents, what is our preachers, what is our culture, and then getting rid of everything that's not us. That's how we find our true destiny, our true life's work and our true calling. Let's see. It's where we tap into the collective unconscious, the place in our psyche where our genius, gift, mission exists. Our transpersonal identity is in the realm of the archetypes. Okay, the next piece. Unlike a lot of people, your consciousness or psychic sensitivities are free of interference from your logical functioning. In this lifetime, your consciousness needs to realize the ultimate meaning of life. It needs to find its truth. It needs to intuit and unmanifest reality as it actually exists. Okay, I want to stop here because this is in contrast to your identity. Your self-identity, your ego, your self-concept needs to remain open and curious and, to anything that's being brought in through your senses, those perceptions. But here, this part of your being is, your consciousness itself, not your ego, not your identity, but your consciousness itself needs to do the opposite of that. It needs to realize the ultimate meaning of life. It needs to find the truth. So what this could look like is that when you're in touch with your ego or building that self-concept, you want to remain open to any sensory perceptions and not attach meaning to them as far as your ego goes. When you're bringing in those perceptions, you're just, you're letting them flow in as raw data, and you're not attaching meaning to them as far as your identity goes. Like, if you get an impression, you're not making it mean something about you personally. You're not using it to try to build, a healthy self-concept. And then in your consciousness, maybe you can funnel those perceptions, that raw data, to your consciousness and relegate that task of creating meaning from those perceptions to your consciousness itself versus your identity. So let it bypass your identity. Don't make it mean anything about you, but allow it to mean something about life in general. Our consciousness is that part of us that is life, that's outside of our identity, our emotions, any other part of us. So that's what I would advise with this. Let's see. And your consciousness can achieve this through exploration of different cultures, belief systems, and ways of being and living. It will meet its need to find the truth via your close relationships or through the development of the ability to identify with others, or the ability to see things from another person's point of view or put yourself in their shoes. And this other doesn't necessarily have to be a person, but it can be representative of anything outside of yourself, including consciousness itself. Okay, a dysfunction of your consciousness could look like confusion, laziness, daydreaming, spaciness, escapism, drifting, addiction, poor reality testing, or glamorous delusions. Okay. And the need for your consciousness to find its truth or meaning for life. The unconscious expression could look like, again, it's externalized, so going outside the self, fundamentalism, apologetics, holy wars, holding beliefs at a solely mental level, or in your case, egoic or identity level, over-optimism, overextension, and bad judgment, or leaping before you look. Conscious expression, internalized, would be the realization that truth in the form of beliefs is subjective. My truth is not everyone's truth. A non-static worldview that changes as you change. Beliefs that are held at the gut or heart level. A balance of faith or trust in life with common sense and limits. So, God helps those who help themselves, right? You can't just always rely on God. You can't just always have faith and trust in life, but you have to actively work towards, having a secure life as well. It's an interdependent relationship between us and God. God does his part or her part, and we do our part. Love of freedom, enthusiasm, high spirits, adventurousness, principled, or faith in your ideals. Okay, meeting your need to find the truth via relationships. Okay, now we're talking about the need to find the truth is from your consciousness. And then we got to think about, okay, which type of relationships are we talking about? I guess relationships characterized by equality between partners. So for you, I would translate this into you're somebody who there is a sense of equal importance between your consciousness itself and your identity or your ego. Unsuccessful navigation. So in other words, you don't consider your identity or ego less important than, the God part of yourself, your consciousness. You hold both with equal reverence and respect. Unsuccessful navigation can look like a pattern of chronic submissiveness or directiveness in your relationships between your ego and your consciousness, an ability to form stable emotional bonds, fear of intimacy between these two aspects of yourself, extreme dependency or extreme fear of dependency of one or either of these aspects of yourself. Okay, I'm going to check that I'm still recording here. Okay. Now we're going to go into your infant wound. Your infant wound or developmental trauma revolves around your connection to the world of the unseen. So you could have had caregivers who taught you that your way of connecting to God or Source or the Creator was not the right way. Or you could have had imaginary friends as a child that left you once you told your parents and they got freaked out about it. You're somebody who as a small child could have been picking up on, realities outside of what's considered normal perceptually. And then healing your relationship to the divine through sensory experiences of any kind. So things like listening to music, viewing beautiful naturescapes, or touching your feet to the earth are super healing and connecting for you. Your natural abilities to tap into the unseen realms could have been overwhelming for you as you aged because of your early wounding and sensitivity to this issue. So again, you could have been tapping into things, as a young child, and maybe your parents got really scared. And then, because of their reaction, then you got scared and you started trying to shut down your emotions, shut down your sensory perceptions and things like that. Okay. So the origins of the wound was not the seeing of the thing. It was, or the perceiving of the things outside of, ordinary sensory perception or reality. It was that the way that the people in your life reacted to it. So maybe they told you, well, that's not right. Maybe they were Christian and they were afraid that you were like seeing ghosts or something, and they're like, well, you're lying about that. Or maybe if they thought you were telling the truth, they were super freaked out, like you were tapping into the demonic forces or something. So the origin of the wound is that you are not perceiving, you are not sensing reality in the right way. And the right way is somebody else's way. It's not your way. It's what's culturally or religiously or whatever acceptable. So that's the wound, the childhood. And because when we're talking about this wound, this is like between the ages of 18 months to 3 years. So again, this is going to be highly unconscious, just like the emotional, any dysfunction that still exists in your emotional body. It's the same thing. It's to that degree of unconsciousness because it happens so early, so young in your life. So your inner child need, the teeny tiny you, is you have that inner child need is the need for calm or serenity, which is inner security. And I think there's a parallel here. This need for inner security is probably what caused a lot of dysfunction in the emotions, and that need to feel like you got to control things. Because if you're experiencing things outside of what other people are considering normal and they're reacting to that, and you're seeing their fear, you're seeing their judgment, whatever, then yeah, you're going to feel out of control and you're going to seek, the need for security is a basic human need. We all need that. We all need to feel, secure and safe. So the healthier, effective strategy for trying to meet that need is sensory experiences that silence inner noise. So listening to music, singing, gardening, dancing, cuddling, etc. The unconscious expression is to try to attain that security externally via things like greed, so excessive money, possessions, or stagnation through unhealthy predictability, monotony, stubbornness, or inflexibility. Conscious expression would be you have inner security, self-esteem, good self-care, inner stillness and calm, aversion to drama and complexity. Okay, and then the wound to your divine feminine. I'm going to get rid of this highlighter here real quick. Okay, so the wound to the Divine Feminine is the wound that, everybody has, it doesn't matter what your gender is, but it's the wound to the feminine aspects of reality and existence. So the feminine, is open, is receptive, is, more intuitive, versus the masculine is more, it's more about will and getting things done, and it's more about doing versus feeling and perceiving, and we all have that because we all live in the patriarchy. And like I said, it doesn't matter what your gender is, we all have feminine and masculine energies. So but most of us, the feminine is wounded because we do live in the patriarchy. So for you, your personal wound to your Divine Feminine is the kind of work that you view as worth doing or not. And again, this ties back into your moon, letting other people decide for you what success looks like. What work should I be doing? What do they think I should be doing for work? And then, as well as the way you've gone about bringing that work into manifestation, is what is signified by the wound to your Divine Feminine. And with your Divine Feminine in hiding, there can be a habit for you of not completing projects, avoidance of opportunities, a lack of identifying as mature in what one does, or a lack of authority in your work or offerings. Healing for your Divine Feminine is becoming willing to honor your own instinct for how things should get done and why. And the evolutionary intention is to develop a grounded and stable relationship with your instinctive side. A relationship that it doesn't have to become predictable, but it does have to have some consistency to it. And then with this Divine Feminine wound, you could look for the Divine Feminine in other people, so you don't have to express that yourself. You don't have to express that in yourself. So you could be attracted to people that are, considered mature or successful, those Capricorn types. And then the evolutionary intention is inviting others to show you how you do and don't relate to the Divine Feminine in your life. So instead of seeking, the Divine Feminine out in others who are successful and mature, you're going to be using others as a mirror. So when you're engaging with somebody, you're going to be saying, well, is this person a reflection of me or not? Versus just putting, all of that Divine Feminine onto another person and then unconsciously trying to seek that out through them. So what that could look like in the real world is you continually attracting partners or friends who are successful, but then you're not successful, or not thinking that you're successful, because you're unconsciously projecting what you are and what your wound is onto other people. It's also about being honest with others and yourself, even when that honesty could make others uncomfortable. For you, the natural feminine is present in your emotional expression, so there's a link between your Divine Feminine and your emotions. Your natural way of expressing your emotions is authentic, raw, total, and very intense. You learned early in life that spontaneously and fully expressing your deepest, most intense, and darkest emotions was not appropriate or acceptable. Your emotional nature itself and the natural means of emotive expression is what has been feared and judged by external authorities. and it's what you've been punished for in the name of not shaking at the Saturnian status quo. To heal your divine feminine moon or emotions, the pain that comes from that requires the ability to open space for the purpose of emotional expression and nurturance of yourself. The divine feminine's authentic expression involves being on your own. Again, going into solitude. Not loneliness, but solitude. I guess I'll make a distinction here. So loneliness, like I said before, we can have 10 people in our lives, but if they don't really know who we truly are, because we don't know who we truly are, yeah, we're always going to feel lonely. But in solitude, we cannot feel lonely. We might not have anybody else around us except ourselves. But when we go into solitude and build a really strong relationship with ourselves, we don't feel lonely, because we're building that relationship to self. We're figuring out who we are, so that we can heal all these wounds that we've been talking about: the emotional wound, the early child wound, the feminine wound. I gotta find where I was at. Yeah, the divine feminine's authentic expression involves being on your own with a natural feminine, making contact with your emotions. Healthy and healing living means being willing to feel all that you have the capacity to feel. And you can achieve this by finding or creating outlets for expression of your intense emotionality. You feel the natural feminine inside of yourself and likely will be able to feel it in others. For you, your emotions and the natural feminine are fused together, making one incapable of working without the other. So if your emotions are shut down, if they're controlled or repressed, then your natural feminine, your divine feminine, is also going to be shut down and controlled and repressed. Okay, we're coming up to the end of your reading here. This is the last thing I wanted to touch on, which is your ancestral or past life patterns. We all have ways of being that feel familiar and therefore comfortable to us. Some of these patterns we inherited from our parents, and them from their parents, and so on and so forth. For those who believe in reincarnation, we might think of these patterns as having their origins from our past life rather than from our ancestors. Whatever your personal belief on their origins, we know that firmly established ways of being exist. And you've probably heard the saying, the only sure things in life are death and taxes. And I personally feel that one more sure thing should be added to that list. And that thing is change. The human experience is one of change. No man or woman will be able to leave this world unchanged. Whether through things we don't want or things we do want, whether for better or for worse, we are all changed by the experiences of our life. In our birth charts, we can see where and how we will be asked to radically change. I say asked to change because we all have free will. Life will bring experiences our way that prompt us to become the new version of ourselves, the person we are supposed to become. But we can choose to try and remain unchanged by those experiences. We can stubbornly and fearfully hold on to the person we now know ourselves to be, the person we've always been. But what most people don't know is that we can only do this for so long. This is because we have free will, but so too does the Creator, nature, God, or whatever you personally call the higher forces at work in the world. Change is a natural law of those forces. And for those that doubt this, all you need to do is look around and see that with time, all other creatures and beings on this planet are subject to this law of change. There are natural order and laws that exist for our plane of existence. And it's when we use our free will to try and go against these laws instead of work with them that we needlessly suffer. Changing ancestral or past life patterns is hard and takes us out of our comfort zone. The person we are each asked to become by the natural law and will of the Creator is diametrically opposed to who we are and have been. Some experience fascination around the type of person they are asked to become, while others experience fear. No matter your personal feelings regarding this lifetime metamorphosis, the person you'll become will in some way be the exact polar opposite of the person you've always been. And that's due to the fact, to natural laws of the universe, things like polarity. We live on a plane of existence where things change and grow and evolve through polarity. So your particular ancestral or past life patterns, your likely karmic pattern from past lives or ancestry is emotional suppression for the purposes of control or security, which we saw in your moon, we saw in your childhood wounding. We could also see that in your identity formation, not letting that raw data come in as just sensory perception and not attaching meaning to it. All that stuff is linked together because we're holistic beings. We're not machines or robots. So your need for security was likely wrought due to fated experiences that were paranormal or supernatural in nature. It doesn't have to be. It could be anything that you perceive that was outside of, what's considered normal states of consciousness. And then to meet the need for security and to regain control, your emotions and life were suppressed and controlled. We already talked about that. Breaking this karmic pattern is of special importance for your status or career. There may be or have been circumstances outside of your control that forced you away from work for a bit in order for you to reestablish connection to the lost part of yourself, which is your emotions, and possibly also your perceptions. And then once you find or found that security inside of yourself again, through the opening of your emotions, perceptions, and impressions, you will have then been able to gain the self-mastery needed to find and perform the work that is in alignment with your true self and interest. So for this, your karmic pattern need is the need for mastery or integrity in your career or public role. So it's the same as for your emotions. The strategy is the same: isolation, solitude for the purpose of learning self-approval. And then the unconscious and conscious expressions are going to be the same. The area of life for karmic patterns. Your old patterning revolves around having experiences that lie outside of the ability of your conscious mind to comprehend. Experiences that can revolve around things like death, sex, and the paranormal. Okay, and then it's basically the same as your emotions, the same successful and unsuccessful navigation here. Okay, so that is the karmic patterning. And then a lot of what we already talked about, so learning how to be in solitude, to sit with your emotions, to figure out, who you really are, what's really important to you, what's going to make you happy, and then letting any sensory data that comes in, via your senses and your perceptions to start forming an identity that's authentic to you versus, somebody else. All of that is going to translate into the breaking of those karmic patterns and the becoming of this opposite person that I talked about at the beginning of this section here. Let me go back. Yeah, the ways that we'll be asked to radically change, to become this person that's diametrically opposed to the person that we've that we've always been and is, is what we know. So for you, that looks like becoming someone who is vulnerable, who's really in touch with their emotions. It's the opposite of suppressing and controlling emotions and not being open and vulnerable. So the need is to experience or know both oneself and others through feeling. The strategy is measured, calculated vulnerability. And I think, let's see if it talks about what that means here. So you'll grow and evolve through vulnerability, both with self and others. Vulnerability with self is achieved through honest sharing of feelings, needs, and motivations with the conscious mind, ego personality, in a delicate dance of showing and hiding. The sign is Cancer, and it craves intimacy but simultaneously fears it. That fear of vulnerability are raw emotions. I forget where this was in your chart, but it talked about raw emotions. And deep connection is what creates the crab's shell. It's shyness, reactivity, repression, manipulation. The crab being naturally soft, it needs its shell for protection. The crab wants to come out of its shell, but will or should only do so with those whom it's vetted as being safe. And this goes back to the calculated vulnerability. So when we're learning to be in touch with our emotions again after having controlled and repressed them for so long, we want to make sure that we're only opening, the vulnerable parts of ourselves with people whom we've vetted as being able to handle those more vulnerable parts of ourselves with care, that they're not going to emotionally harm us. So the unconscious expression for this new person that, your whole life and life experiences is helping you to become, the unconscious expression of that would look like an imbalance, so either over or under caretaking of others, or expecting others to mother you, or imbalance and vulnerability with others, so over or under sharing. So the first piece is about nurturance and caretaking. You don't want that to be imbalanced. You don't want to be under nurturing others or over nurturing them, because we're talking about adults here with other adults. Or then alternatively, because you're an adult, you don't want to be expecting others to nurture you. That would be the unconscious expression. Or over or under sharing vulnerably with people. The conscious expression, connecting to your emotions, developing a loving relationship to yourself in solitude, caring for yourself, self-responsibility. So that means I'm taking care of meeting my needs and making myself happy versus expecting others to do it. Vulnerability with safe people and nurturing of yourself and others via support, help, or protection. And then the area of life, it deals with your self-esteem, money, and possessions. So proving yourself to yourself, intentional change of a personal fault or flaw that you have, issues of self-respect and evaluating your own worth. So successful navigation of this area of life could look like confidence and self-esteem based on concrete self-adjustment and self-development, effective worry-free management of your resources. Unsuccessful navigation, materialism or greed, and the equation of self-worth with the value of what you own. I'll also add here what you do because of the energies that you carry in your chart. You want to have that security and self-worth come from inside yourself versus from outside, because that's when we get into trouble. When we try to get our needs met externally from sources that, aren't the best or aren't healthy for us. A lack of self-respect, fear of risk, collapse of willpower leading to a failure in the world, or life-limiting concern with material security. So for you, you're going to grow, that old person that, again, either came from ancestral patterns or past life, whatever you believe in, is somebody who is controlling and repressing their emotions. Specifically, now we're talking about which area of life, emotions connected to anything that's arising from experiences that are outside of our control. So anything arising from forces outside of our control, things like death, the paranormal, or it could even be like sensual or sexual experiences. So going from that type of person into becoming someone who is now open, they're open to their emotions, they're fully feeling everything, they're developing a relationship to self. Their security is now coming from inside of themselves versus the outside. So they are, they know who they are, they're figuring that out, they're honing a craft or a skill that is connected to who they truly are, what their real interests and values are. And they're finding their security through that, and they're doing that for the work versus, because they're shut down emotionally and they don't know who they are, they're trying to get that security externally through things like money or status, or, I guess for you, the most blatant example would be work or a career that other people, it would impress, most everybody else, but for you, you hate it. You're like, I hate this. It doesn't make me happy. This is not who I am. I'm just doing it to try to impress other people, or to try to gain their respect and approval, because I don't have it myself, because I'm disconnected from my emotions and myself. And I don't have that secure relationship for myself. So I have to try to find it, outside of myself. I think that's all. Those were again, when I looked at your chart, these were the important pieces that stood out. I'm going to try to attach this document to the message that I send you. That way you can have it. I'll turn it into a document online, but I don't know how long I'll be holding on to that. I might, delete it from my Google Drive at some point. So I would encourage you to, if you want to keep this, to print it out, or I could even email it to you if you want to. That way you can have it. And, because this is a reading for a lifetime. This is lifetime's worth of work and growth. So this is not something that I'm not reading for you today and tomorrow it's not going to be applicable. This is going to be applicable for the rest of your life. It's basically your life history. So anyways, thank you for allowing me to hone my craft in reading your chart. I enjoyed it, and I hope that this is, helpful and healing for you in some way. All right, take care.